Hey everyone! Before we open today's file, please make sure to follow us on Instagram at d.s.radio, where you can find all the images that go along with today's case. You can drop us an email at contact.dsradio@gmail.com. You can find all of our socials in the Linktree bio on our Instagram profile, including links to merch. If you're feeling especially generous, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio, where you can get access to our exclusive Instagram page and make suggestions for upcoming episode topics that you would like us to cover. Speaking of Patreon, thanks to our Patreons, Riff Cult, Cropley Crab, Cash Broadus, Raspberry Jr., Jason R. Nelson, Creepy Paper, Jamie Sook, Michael Laughlin, Lindsay Keller, Mike Wright, Greer Weaver, Kelsey Carruthers, Linz Gibbon, Drake Holvig, Only Child, Michael M, Wesley Akers, Riaz K, Emily Medeiros, Pip, Heather Wynn, Graves, Devon Sweatshirt, The Ordained Sinister Minister, and Philip Hoffman. Hey everyone, and welcome to Dystopian Simulation Radio. I'm your host, Linz.
And I'm your other host, Chris.
How's things, Chris?
They're good.
Been a while since we were together in person.
It has. This is the first time we've recorded in person in 4 episodes?
Yeah, if you don't know the story, Chris Mac ate the episodes and never spat them back out ever again.
Nope. I mean, I'll probably find them one day somewhere in like some weird folder somewhere.
In one of Chris's weird folders.
Shut up.
All right, Chris, intros aside, I have a clip, very short clip, and I'm going to play it to you. It's going to be quite abrupt, and I want you to have a little guess about what it is before I tell today's story.
Okay. Was that my son?
Unfortunately, no. Would you like to hear that one more time?
Go on then. Was that a crow?
This is the voice of a very interesting man that I met recently.
Okay.
And the topic of today's story.
You need some interesting people on your journeys, don't you?
I certainly do. I think this has to be one of the most interesting people that I've ever met. And I want you to know that I went out into the field because I wanted to get an interview with somebody for an episode of DSR. I wanted to meet one of the characters that I talked about.
Interesting.
So, without any further ado, this is the story of Arnold.
Schwarzenegger?
Settle in, Chris. I'm about to tell you the story about how we got here.
I'm ready.
It was the 22nd of April, 2022, and I was searching for local places of interest in the south of Sweden when I happened upon 2 words that made my heart skip a beat. Cannibal Museum.
Ooh. Do they have a gift shop?
No, yes, they did. We'll get to that. So always a fan of the strange and unusual, and already with a couple of cannibal-related episodes under my DSR belt, I knew that I had to go there by any means necessary before my return flight home in the next several days. So a brief search online revealed that the museum was located in a rural village in Skåne County, over an hour's drive from where I was staying. Information was scarce in English, but it was out there with the help of Google Translate. And there was a phone number listed online, and those who were interested in visiting were instructed to call ahead of time and book an appointment with the owner, Arnold, who you heard screaming earlier. I had our Swedish DSR correspondent Robin call the number for me. You may remember Robin from a recent bonus episode, Gista Karlsson and their Engelholm UFO. So we waited with bated breath for someone to answer the phone, only for it to ring out and go to voicemail, which really frustrated me. We made this call from a coffee shop, And Robin was like, really? You want me to do it here? You want me to ask about the cannibal guy here? And I was like, yeah, why not? So later that night, we tried again, and lo and behold, Arnold answered.
Hej Arnold.
Ja, hejsan. Robin heter jag. Jag och min flickvän satt och tittade runt och hittade det här kannibalmuseet.
Okej.
Arnold was at a Bryan Adams concert. And he was busy over the weekend.
Is Bryan Adams a cannibal?
Maybe. Who knows what he does in his spare time? Seems like a nice man, but they always are. So he told us to call back the following day to organise something, and we did just that, and we soon found ourselves with an appointment.
Tisdag, vad tycker ni? Vid 2-tiden eller så?
Ja, men det funkar perfekt.
Tuesday, April 26th, 2 p.m.
Ooh.
I was excited, I'm not going to lie. I was like, yes!
And how far was this place from where you were?
An hour and a half drive.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
Not too bad, but, it's out there, rural. So as the day crept closer, I wondered if contacting a man who owned a cannibal museum on his property in the arse end of nowhere, where he could probably kill, cook and eat us without anyone knowing, was the greatest idea I'd ever had. Turned out, it was. We set off around midday and talked about all the things that could go wrong as we followed Google Maps to our destination.
In 300 meters, you will arrive at your destination.
We drove through winding, narrow country roads past forest, farmland, and even more farmland until eventually we saw it.
You have arrived.
A large rock in yellow that read Kannibal Museum with a painting of a black crow atop a bone.
Ooh.
We turned down a gravel path and nervously approached Arnold's lair. A beautiful countryside home that he shared with his family, a fluffy pregnant cat, and several chickens.
Oh.
It was delightful.
That sounds like a lovely place for a cannibal museum.
It was totally delightful, I'm not kidding.
So is this cannibal museum, was it a room in his house? Was it adjacent on his property? What was it?
It was on his property.
Right.
It's not a museum in the traditional sense of, let's go to the Hancock Museum. No.
Okay.
It's a collection of things, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
So he introduced himself right off the bat and began telling us a story about a time he went rafting with an insane Geordie instructor who almost killed Arnold and his group after flipping the raft in the rapids several times. He basically said to me, "Where are you from?" I said, "England." He said, "Where?" I said, "Newcastle." And then he just starts going into this big story about a crazy Geordie instructor that he had. And this is what Arnold is like. Lovely man, a lot of stories. You'll never get a word in edgeways. He's got a story for everything. He's been to over 170 countries.
Wow.
In his life.
How old is he, roughly?
He must be in his 50s.
Good going for you, only your 50s.
50s plus. I'm not sure. Arnold will listen, and I did forgot to ask how old he was, so...
What's that? You're saying he was a swift 21-year-old?
Yeah, he was a strapping young lad, total whippersnapper. But yeah, he's been around a while, and he's been around the globe.
Well, kudos to that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. So he walked us across the courtyard to see his wife's in-house flea market and the pottery studio that he had built for her, where she created these quirky cups for what Arnold called cuckoo coffee. That's coffee with a splash of vodka that Swedes enjoy in the winter, particularly Arnold. Interesting side note on our friend Arnold. He's a member of the Republic of Önneköp, a micronation that declared its independence from Sweden in 1995 and has attacked the next door village several times. But that's a story for a whole other episode.
That's something I'd love to cover sometime. I love micronations and the stories. You've got is it Republic of Sealand out
Yes.
in the middle of the British
Yes.
Channel, English Channel. And then there's various other places that have been, declared independent states. But I love this little detail that they've attacked the nearby village several times.
Yes, they have their own flag. I believe it's also, this flag is hoisted in the little town square, the village square.
That's amazing.
And cougar coffee is the official drink of the micronation. And if you want to go there one day, Chris, I'm sure we can organise it.
I am down. You
Yep.
had me at vodka.
Yep. So Arnold rummaged around in his hen house and he produced 2 eggs and he handed them to me saying, "For your breakfast tomorrow." I would be lying if my first thought wasn't, "Please don't let these eggs contain a pre-installed voodoo curse." From there, Arnold led us to an old hen house filled floor to ceiling and wall to wall with mementos of his travels. Like I said, Arnold's travelled to over 170 countries, and he's a member of Club 100. I'm going to play a clip for you now, and this is Arnold. It's a segment from the interview we later did in his courtyard after he showed us around the museum. This is Arnold talking about what got him into, making this cannibal museum and this travelling lifestyle.
When I was a small kid, I listened to radio to a big explorer in Sweden called Sten Bergman. And he was adopted by a cannibal. And I was like, wow, what a fantastic thing. I wanted to really explore the world and maybe feel the heat in the jungle in Amazonas and maybe meet some Indians, real Indians. And also my dream was that one day I should meet a cannibal. And as a small farmer boy, I managed to do it.
There you go, kids. Hang on to your dreams. Never give up. You too can meet a cannibal.
Chris!
What? It's an inspirational message.
It is.
Never give up on your dreams.
True. But I think what was quite a strange dream became a very, very interesting life for Arnold. So as you've probably noticed, Arnold has a particular interest in cannibals, or as he calls them, people who eat people. And he has done since he was a child. In his book, Arnold's Adventure, which contains stories of his travels accompanied by really nice photographs, he explains that he was first inspired by zoologist Sten Bergman and the stories of his adventures told over the radio. He was fascinated with Bergman's tales of cannibal tribes in New Guinea. In 1962, Bergman wrote a book titled My Father is a Cannibal. The book recorded his experiences from 1956 to 58 when he lived in New Guinea with his wife. While there, he was adopted by the chief of a tribe, Chief Pinim, and observed many ceremonies and traditions during his stay, including cannibalistic rituals. Inspired by these stories, Arnold decided to have adventures of his own, and just like Sten Bergman, dreamed of living amongst these native peoples, and so he did. Now, Chris, does this story kind of remind you of Louis de Rougemont, only it's real?
Yeah, I was just about to ask, wait a second, there actually are cannibal tribes?
Yeah.
Cannibal kings out there?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, maybe we gave Louis a bad rap.
Yeah, but Louis was lying.
Nobody rode turtles. How many turtles has Arnold ridden in his storied life? I mean, 170 countries, you've got to have ridden at least one.
You know what he has ridden? A crocodile.
It's a long turtle.
Crocodiles. They're just long turtles.
The first time I met people who had eaten people was up in Western New Guinea. The cannibals I met in the 80s was a tribe in Melanesia called the Big Penis Protectors tribe, the Big Numbers. And I met also a warrior chief who had been eaten more than 80 human meals in his life. And he was a fantastic person. He was a real gentleman. And I also met people in Africa who's been eating, and they all say it tastes like calf meat. It's sweet. But I haven't. No. But I actually had 4 a bit odd persons who came to visit me, and which in different occasions, who had eaten human meat. Not because they wanted it, but it happened that way.
A lot to unpack there. So he's had 4 people who have eaten people to visit them, but not because they wanted to eat meat. It turned out that way. So is this like some kind of like a plane's gone down and they're struggling to survive, and they've eaten they've eaten even the leather off the suitcases, and now they're like, well, Jeff, my conscience is clear.
You know what? When I was listening to this story, I was perplexed by it, and I did not come up with that. You're a lot smarter than me, because I was like, I said, how can you have eaten people but you didn't intend to eat people? And I never thought it could be some kind of survival situation. Could they have been, Chris? Dinner guests of Mao Sugiyama's...
They could have been, but they intended to eat it.
True.
So it would have had to have been like maybe if Mao Sugiyama was doing a practice run.
Stealth cannibal.
I'll just try this and see how it goes over.
Yeah.
But unless he has multiple penises.
It could have been other parts that he never talked about, like maybe a toe or a pinky finger, or, you don't know what he's cutting off these days. But yeah, so as you heard there, he spent time with you looked, by your reaction, it looked like you enjoyed the big Nambas, the big penis tribe.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah. So this tribe, do you know about them?
I've never heard of them before. No.
Neither had I, but he showed us some pictures of them, and they're a tribe that wears really long sort of extensions over their penises.
Right,
Like
okay.
really long, as in 2 feet long or something.
Do they battle with them?
No, it's just like, they do decorate the tips of them. You can put different things in the tips, like you can put a feather in, you go into the market, you put in a blue feather.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're going to a ceremony, maybe you'll hang something else on the end of there. And yeah, it's basically secured by, to quote Arnold, tying a string around the balls. And he does actually have one of these sheaths. Yeah, he has one and he showed it to us. And he has a habit of putting things in your hands and going, hold this, dear, before he tells you what you're holding. So on to the museum. It's an old hen house, as I said. And Arnold keeps all of his treasures from his travels there. Well, the majority of them. And each have their own colourful story. So as we walked into the museum, Arnold showed us a large red mask and told us it was worn by a medicine man. He explained that he was able to buy the mask before it was destroyed or hidden, as would usually be done after the ceremonies. So Arnold then went on to show a variety of masks that he said were authentic. Not the kind of masks that a tourist could pick up in a gift store, but the real deal. When I asked how he managed to convince a local to part with the mask, he said it came down to offering more money than could be refused. So this is how he managed to get all of these rare items in his museum that other people would have a really hard time getting their hands on otherwise. He would also trade for these items too. So he went on to show us this beautiful purple pearlescent shell that he said he traded for a pig in East Timor. So he described buying a pig from a local market, shoving it into the back of a taxi, driving it back out to this rural place, and trading it for the shell. So he said, I had to go to the capital and buy a big bloody pig for a lot of dollars. And I tied it up and I put it in the trunk in the taxi. We finally got to his place and I exchanged the pig for it. It's beautiful, isn't it? He then held the shell up and turned it in the light for us to see. And he commented on how soft it was and then rubbed it delicately across Robin's cheek to demonstrate. Which is cute, but also a bit creepy considering we are in a cannibal museum and he was getting up close and personal with our tender flesh.
That's quite romantic to me.
I know, it was, yeah, very unique experience. So next he showed us an item from Greenland, which was a necklace of what looked like bones that was something like a rosary for a shaman. It was long, large and bulky, and it had hung outside a shaman's house that Arnold had been staying near with a group of men who he'd been hunting seals with.
So much to unpack in every single one of these sentences. It's taken me a while to process each
This
one.
is how I felt in the museum. Like, you look at a thing, he picks it up, 1 minute you're in Africa, and then you're somewhere else, then you're hunting seals, you know? It's like 170 countries, that's a lot of stories. So
Yeah.
when you go in there, the story. You look at something, you touch something, story.
That's impressive as well that he remembers all of those stories. Just
Yeah.
like from that many countries that he's visited.
So after this, he swiftly turned around, he reached for something and said, hold this, Linz, holding out what looked like a long black whip with like some white hair around the top. So I took it, looked in my hand, and quickly followed up with, it's not something's penis, is it? To which he replied, it's a bull penis.
So hold on a second. I'm getting slightly lost in this story.
You're feeling how I felt in that tiny hen house. Information overload.
How does a bull's penis that has been converted into a whip relate to cannibalism?
It doesn't, Chris. And many things in there didn't.
So was this a museum, sort of a museum of cannibalism ... and other curiosities?
Yes, I think that would be a less catchy but more
Accurate,
apt kind
yeah.
of title for this place.
You wouldn't. Curiosity Museum doesn't get the big numbers like Cannibal Museum.
Exactly. I mean, maybe. He does have a lot of items that no other place probably has.
So does he refer to it as a cannibal museum or as a people who eat people museum?
Cannibal Museum.
Oh, okay. Suppose it.
It's catchy. It gets straight to the point. Yeah, so bull penis in hand. I knew this was coming because I'd seen a bull penis before at the Victor Wynne Museum in London. I had also blocked it from my memory, along with the Boxing Helena-esque pornography that they had scattered around the place.
Helena!
Arnold ushered us further into the room to the back section of this small henhouse, the furthest away from the exit, and filled with even more mementos of his travels. I pointed out a shrunken head hanging from the ceiling and asked about it. I'd been most interested in the shrunken heads. Like, this whole trip I've been thinking, shrunken heads. We're going to see some shrunken heads. Now, I don't know how much you know about shrunken heads, but...
I mean, I've got a cursory level knowledge, like basically from cartoons when you were a kid. You know, when they'd be like...
cartoons were you watching?
Oh man, what cartoon? There was a cartoon where somebody had shrunken heads.
Oh.
I can't remember what it
like
was.
Bugs Bunny, I guess.
No, well...
he was always boiling in pots.
Yeah, maybe, but
cutting
no...
up carrots in the water.
I feel like it was... If anybody knows what I'm talking about, please tell me, because... my memory's completely shot, but like I'm sure there was a villain in something. Not every week, but would turn up sometimes, and the thing that he did would shrink people's heads down. Now, actual shrunken heads. I think there's an X-Files episode of it actually as well. But anyway, actual shrunken heads. How do they shrink the bone?
Okay, so shrunken heads are made by removing the skull from the back of the head.
Right.
So they'll cut down the back of your head here. They remove the skull and they boil in bark and herbs. And then a wooden ball is usually placed inside so that the skin can form around it as it boils.
Right.
The mouth is sewn shut. They put like these little seeds,
okay,
like to kind of give it more shape because the skull's gone.
Yeah,
cartilage is gone.
Right.
There's a wooden ball inside, and they'll use seeds to kind of project areas that would usually project out. So then they sew the mouth shut, and ash is massaged into the skin, and it's believed that this process harnesses the soul of the enemy inside. Oh. So the owner of it has power from the dead enemy, and the soul of the dead enemy is contained within it, because if it ever got out, it would take revenge.
So this is shrinking a head is almost like keeping a trophy.
Yeah.
And sort of like vanquishing one's enemy, taking their power, and, you know, as a result, you've got this collection of shrunken heads.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. But I think since the 1930s, don't quote me on that, but it's quite hard to find an authentic one because they began to trade for them. So, you know, they trade a shrunken head for, like, maybe a gun, like arms. And because it became like a commodity, they would start faking them.
Right.
So they would make them from maybe a sloth, a monkey, or just goat skin, you know, something like that. So Arnold has a small collection of shrunken heads. The one I pointed out, the largest that was hanging from the ceiling, was called Oscar. So he pointed at another and said, "This is Folke Jonsson." And then again he said, "Hold this, dear," which, you know, to be a phrase that I became very wary of. So I held out my hand and he dropped a small shrunken head into my palm and he said, "I call this one the little troll." So this was in my hand.
And just the head, right?
Yeah, just the head. He turned to another one and said, "I call this one Sasse, after the Bank of Nordea's bank chief in Malmö."
Obviously.
This is the kind of things that Arnold came out with constantly. Just like weird stories and then kind of strange facts with no other explanation.
It sounds fascinating, to be honest.
I was about to say, why is that? And then, you know, and then you turn around and he's showing you something else.
Boom, he's on to the next one.
Exactly. So that's how he showed us around the museum. And we only saw a small handful of the collection in the time that we were there because there is so much. It's piled. It's piled on piles. We didn't get to see or ask about a lot of the other things. So I think if you go, you'll probably get a different experience. You'll see the big things he has in there, but you'll probably get a different experience each time. So Arnold then held out a combat knife from New Guinea. It was made from the bottom jaw of a crocodile and it had a deep groove running through it to make it easier to pull out of the victim. He pressed this into Robin's shoulder.
And what was Robin's reaction?
Well, Robin being Robin, it was extremely calm and he went, "Oh, I see it has a big groove in there. Is that for blood or to make it easier to pull out?"
Yes!
I, on the other hand, was kind of like, oh, and it suddenly dawned on me that we were in an old hen house in the middle of nowhere with a cannibal enthusiast who was now waving around a dagger. I glanced around the room and various knives and swords were dangling from the walls, and my mind went straight to the last DM that you sent me before I left that had a major typo in it, where you said, "Lol, what are you doing? I'm kind of nervous now knowing you. Bring your cocks, lol." To which I said, I assume you mean knucks, as in knuckle duster. And I thought to myself, that's probably the last exchange I'll ever have with Chris.
Put that on your tombstone.
What a note to go out on, eh? Bring your cocks. So after demonstrating the dagger, he reaches for something else and he puts it in my hand. This is for you. A chastity belt lock. Basically, I think Arnold called me a hoe in the hen house.
I'm like, your mother listens to this show. Make that joke. No.
I took it and left, and he told us that the man he bought it from thought that Arnold was actually going to use it on his wife and ran back to get the key.
Well, what two consenting adults do in their own free time is their own business.
So there's other things in his collection. For example, the half tooth of a mammoth, which was a giant, weighty, rock-like object that barely fit in my hand.
How did he wrangle? Like, surely you'd think like the Natural History Museum would be like all over that.
That's what I thought when I looked at these things. I was like, you can just get your hands on anything if you live with cannibal tribes and club seals in groups and whatever else you do.
He seems quite like a sort of Indiana Jones-esque figure.
Exactly.
Kind of going around the world, visiting all of these countries, living with the people in these tribes and these groups and encountering what you'd tend to think, no, they don't exist, cannibal tribes, so, people who eat people. Is that everyone bringing these relics and artifacts back to keep in a pin shed?
Yeah, he's the Swedish Indiana Jones. So we also had a voodoo pipe that was wrapped in the spines of a hedgehog, an authentic wooden voodoo doll with nails hammered into it, and small compartments that would contain the hair of a victim, for example. We learned the chief of the Great Penis Protectors, a cannibal tribe chief who had 24 wives. Arnold told me that they only ate their enemies and never anyone they were personally acquainted with.
Oh, that's nice.
He said, for example, that he wouldn't be able to eat us because we had shared a conversation and got to know each other briefly. I breathed a sigh of relief at this news.
It's good to know that there's, a code that they live by.
Yeah, it's not like, if you and I were in a cannibal tribe and we had an argument, I'd suddenly go, fuck Chris, and just eat him one day. So Chris, on to the juicy part.
Oh.
Man meat.
Big men slapping meat.
We learned in the Mao Sugiyama episode, which you can go back and listen to, it's in our archives, what a sautéed wang and balls taste like. In this episode, we're going to get a real connoisseur's answer about the taste.
Okay, so before we get the actual answer, so the stereotypical one that you hear all the time, chicken. Tastes like chicken. And then
I think it's pork.
I've heard chicken a lot.
Oh, okay, well...
I don't know, that's the joke, isn't it? People always make...
the other white meat.
Tastes like chicken, yeah, the other white meat. But then you said earlier that it tasted very much... That these are the people who'd eaten people reported that it had tasted like...
Sweet like a calf.
Yeah, sweet calf meat, like which is very specific.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever eaten calf.
No, me either.
No.
So Arnold said that when the group ate an enemy, they would take the breasts and hips and thighs and feet to make a stew. He said that the cannibal chief didn't eat that. He only ate grilled arm. Earlier that day, Robin had asked me which part of the human body I thought would taste the best, and he suggested the arm. So either Robin's a cannibal chief, or he just knows what a good cut of meat is, which is weird for a vegetarian.
I guess it depends. It depends on the arm, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, Chris has just rolled up his sleeves and showed me a very hairy arm.
Oh, you need to shave this meat.
You need to weed whack that arm before you before you grilled it.
I need to be flayed.
Yeah. So it turns out that these specific cannibals weren't fond of white meat, as in the meat of white people.
Okay.
I'll never forget this, Arnold told us. They said white guys had too much salt, that black guys tasted better, but Asian guys were praised for their, quote, aroma. Which was a very weird sentence to hear.
I don't know what to do with that information.
Neither did I, but good to know. Like I said, the museum was packed and there was no way anyone would have time to see everything in it and hear every story of Arnold's collection in one visit. After a tour of some of the collection, we moved to the courtyard outside, where Arnold was kind enough to answer a few questions about his life and collection and share a couple of stories with us before he suddenly to head off. And I mean he suddenly head off. 1 minute he was at the table, the next minute he was like, well, gotta go, left us in the courtyard, car disappears into the distance, and we're sitting there with chickens going, oh, You may remember at the start of the episode, I played the death scream.
Oh yeah.
We're about to find out where that came from. Any guesses?
No. With Arnold, it could be anything, seemingly.
I met pygmy people in South Cameroon, and I was nearly bitten of a green mamba on that occasion. It was up in his canoe and on me, quite one of most. It was as close as you and me, like 2 decimeters from me. Yeah, and I thought I'd been bitten, so I was screaming like, like death screams, Yeah. And the mamba went down in the water and swam under the canoe up and turned his head and looked on me, and then he swam away.
Now it all makes total sense. I mean, I probably what my reaction would be if I saw a black mamba as well.
He was telling the story in his nice kind of voice, Yeah. He's got a really nice storytelling voice.
He does.
He was so calm when he was telling it, and suddenly, in the middle of this quiet courtyard, he screamed.
Oh, amazing.
Arnold showed us what he called the Black Stone. Any guesses on what the Black Stone is, Chris?
Would it be a stone that was used for like ceremonial purposes? Maybe it's where people were flayed or beheaded or killed, where the meat was demetified.
Ooh, morbid. I like it. But no, you're wrong. Let's put you out of your misery and fillet you. No. Let's put you out of your misery and let Arnold explain to us what the Black Stone is.
In Africa, they have a fantastic thing. They have something called a black stone. The medicine man, some medicine man has it, and I've heard about it. I've been in 50 countries in Africa. I always heard about black stone, but I never seen one. And I thought it was a stone, But when I met a guy who had in Uganda, who was the chief of a place with animals, and there was a lot of snakes in this area. And I said, how can you survive? It's like really a lot of snakes here. Whoa, we have a black stone, he says. So what is this, Is it a stone? No, he said. It's a piece of a leg from a horse, which you take that off, this bone, and then you put it in a tin with a lot of holes in it, and you put that on fire, on charcoals, burning charcoals, and for about 5 hours. And then it's get very blackish, and when you got bitten of a snake, you put it on, and it sucks the poison fluid in it, and then it falls off, and then you can redo it again after boiling it in milk or hot water for, I think it was 20 minutes or something. So it's because you see, all we do vaccines, as we do serums on snake poison on horses, on the blood. So old horses are more or less, they can resist snake poison, and and then they have found out where do it come from? It's come from the here up on the hip of the horse. Yeah. Quite interesting.
That is quite interesting. I've never heard that horses are impervious to snake venom, but I'm not doubting the fact either. I don't know.
Yeah, so Chris, I had no clue that horses were used to make snake antivenom.
Oh.
I literally learned that on the spot from Arnold, and I was completely ignorant to the fact that snake antivenom consists of antibodies from an animal. So what they do is hyper-immunize the horse or sheep or whatever animal with one or multiple snake venoms using non-lethal doses, thus creating an immunological response to trigger the production of antibodies that essentially neutralize the toxins in the venom. These antibodies are taken from the animal's blood and used in the production of snake antivenom.
Wow,
yeah,
I did not know that.
Now, I was sitting there and I was going, what is he talking about? Like, I have no clue. And then I was like, Robin was like, oh yeah, maybe, like, yeah, that makes sense. And I was like, it does? And I didn't know any of this. Just like you, I was like, okay. So the Blackstone is actually used as a type of folk medicine to treat snake bites in Africa, India, Asia, and South America. Although there's no scientific evidence to suggest that it actually works, but it is used. So Arnold showed us the stone, and it was actually really cool to see. It looked basically like a small charred block wrapped in paper. And it was one of my favourite items in the museum just because he'd brought this folk remedy all the way back to Sweden, and I learned something new.
That's ingenious. I'd never...
Yeah, so the most unassuming item in there, I was like, oh, shrunken heads, yeah. But then I saw this thing and it had a really cool story and I learned something. Like, obviously it's not recommended that you use this if you get bitten by a snake because it's not scientifically proven. But the idea is there. And it's interesting to learn about how they make snake antivenom. I did not know that.
No, and if this person, and presumably many others in Africa, if you've heard about it in over 50 countries, use this practice, I mean, it must work to some degree.
Not necessarily, but I tried to look this up and I found a couple of papers where they did some tests on mice. And one seemed to suggest that it helped a little bit, but not significantly enough, you know.
Maybe it just does enough if you get to it quickly enough.
Like a herbal thing, you know, like herbal remedies and things, I guess.
It does enough to not kill somebody, but they'll still feel all venomy.
Yeah, so I found an article, venomy. So I found an article that describes the hypothesis behind the stone, and this article is titled, Mombasa Students Develop Stones to Treat Snake Bite. So Chris, if you could read this paragraph to the people, please.
The black stone, or viper stone, is a piece of processed bone from a cow's thigh bone, and is used as a first aid measure for snake, scorpion, and insect bites. The black stone is made by cleaning, drying, and baking the thigh bone in order to increase its surface area and to make it more absorptive. Traditionally, the black stone was prepared from any animal bone, left to cool in open air, a factor that reoxidized the stone and reduced its absorptive ability. The girls improved on this method, using the thigh bone due to its highly porous nature, and cooling baked bones in an airtight container in order to preserve their absorptive power. Once prepared, the black stone neutralizes the fatal effects of a snake bite by soaking up poison at the entry point. The stone is placed on the skin and a small cut is made on the bitten area until blood oozes out. The stone then absorbs the poison through capillary action, reducing the fatality of a snake bite. Though the Lakoni and Kongowea residents are taking great interest in the stones, some think of them as a form of magic, but the Coast Girls' School students hope to change the mindset by explaining to the residents how the stones work scientifically. The students also found that some of the stones sold in the areas are of poor quality, and embarking on the process of training people on how to make the stones more effectively. The stones are cost-effective for the residents since they can be reused several times. After use, the stones are boiled in salty water, soaked for several hours in fresh milk, and then dried again to restore their absorptive nature.
So, interesting hypothesis. Like the story behind it.
I mean, if I was bitten by a snake and there was another option, I'd be all for it.
Yeah.
I'd feel, knowing this information, I'd think, oh, well, at least someone's not just spending my last moments rubbing me with horse bones for no apparent reason.
Yeah, try it and hope for the best. So like I said, it's by no means scientifically proven, so don't go curing your snake bites with black stones, just go to hospital. But it's very interesting. So Arnold also told us a story about the worst meal he had ever eaten. Do you want to take any guesses at what you think it could be, Chris?
So can I just ask one question first? So Arnold isn't a person who eats people. He's just fascinated with...
Yeah, he's never eaten a person.
Right, okay. So the worst meal he's ever eaten, then, so that cuts off the obvious...
Yeah, no people.
Things. I'm gonna say the worst meal that he's ever eaten was probably a $2.99 special from Wetherspoons.
No. I'm going to play you a file. I was shocked.
Okay.
When he was telling me this, and I just think this led to, it wasn't just a bad meal as in I got a tummy ache. This was a bad meal.
And I even shared a meal who nearly killed me with a voodoo doctor because he had boiled a black and white cat in a kettle. Terrible, absolutely terrible. I love cats. I couldn't eat it, but the pressure on me was so heavy, so in the end I took a few pieces of the head and ate it. And I knew I shouldn't do it, because I felt it. I don't want to eat the cat. And then I got very sick. I got, what do you call it, like a small worm, parasite. And so I was sick. I was extremely sick, and I was maybe on the toilet 30, 40, 50 times a night, and I had no red blood cells, very, very few blood cells left, and the doctors thought I had bone cancer of a parasite. It was very bad, and then finally they found it. Thanks God for this institution of helping me in Lund, Marlin and all the guys. But we didn't have any medicine for it in Sweden. First, it was up in the lungs, so I was coughing 2-3 nights and days in a row, and then it went down to the stomach, and then I was like pale. I was like whiter than your hair, and I was lying, I was very close. And then we imported some medicine from some strange countries, and I drank 2 glasses with 16 pills in each. Then I could kiss my wife again.
Oh, that's nice. The kind of
That's nice. He ate a boiled cat head, got a parasite in his lungs that moved to his stomach, almost killed him. Then he got pills and could kiss his wife again.
I just like how he's got a very interesting way of telling a story that ends up in a that was nice.
It's always so wholesome at the end. It's
Yeah.
like, and then I could kiss my wife again. His wife actually came out when we were recording, and his son. Oh yeah, shout out to Arnold Wernerson. He's releasing a new song. It's called Retro. He's on Spotify. You can look him up.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, his wife came out and she was really nice, and she makes the cuckoo coffee cups. So yeah, that was my time meeting Arnold. He has a book available, and he also is a member of the 100 Club. I'm going to add an extra clip at the end of this episode where Arnold tells you how you can join.
Wow.
If you have been to at least 50 countries, you can be a hangaround. And if you've been to 100, they will interrogate you until you faint, as he said. But yeah.
And you'll post all the visuals and so on at d.s.radio on Instagram.
Exactly. You can see them all there. And I'll be posting the unedited interview on our Patreon.
Oh, yeah, we have a Patreon.
We have a Patreon. Finally, we have a Patreon. And we've been putting some behind-the-scenes stuff and some just little background kind of, bits of information. The all logos, how we do an episode. Chris has been putting some videos up for people to go ahead and watch. I've been adding behind-the-scene pictures, and we're going to have some things like drone footage of the Ängelholm UFO site and unedited interviews and just fun things we're going to start adding there.
There's going to be loads of really fun stuff going up there. If you've enjoyed the podcast and you'd like to support us, please go over to patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio. You can find all the links on our social media bios as well. Currently, we've got 2 tiers on offer. The first tier is just £1. That's a early supporter offer, and in return, we'll give you a shout out on the podcast. And the second tier is the £5 tier, or at least that's how it's set up in the UK. It might appear slightly differently, but it'll be equivalent to that in your country. And that's where you can access all of the extra juicy bonus content that we're talking about.
Yeah, and apparently you can decide what you want to donate per month, which we didn't know until somebody did a custom subscription to us on there.
So you know who you are. We really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we always appreciate you. You know who you are. But yes, all the visuals will be at d.s.radio on Instagram. Go ahead and give us a follow there. You can DM us any recommendations for episodes you would like. And I hope you've all enjoyed the first DSR interview of a guest.
I certainly did. And thank you very much for going out into the field, quite literally, and conducting this.
Yeah, thanks, Robin, for helping out with organising it and coming along with me, as always, in Sweden. And thank you so much, Arnold. You are a treasure, and I hope that we meet you again. Thanks. Bye.
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 I must tell you a little bit about Club 100. Me and Gunnar Mattsson, we was walking in a wadi in Oman, 1995, I think it was, and or 96, and we decided to start a club for guys and ladies who's been with over 100 countries in their life. And now we have about, I don't know if we have 75 members or something, living and dead, or maybe 80 in this club. It's and I'm not in charge of a club anymore, and neither is Gunnar, but it's a fantastic guy called Rainer and his nice friends, and he's running the club today. And I'm so happy. It's really moving on, and we are doing a fantastic tours and trips together and exchanging a lot of information, and sometimes every year we all meet a few days and have some nice to drink and talk and you're complete. You need a 1 week vacation after these meetings, you know. So if you're like if you're done 50 countries, you can be hang around to club100.eu, and if you're over 100, you can be involved in the club after some questionings, of course, from the members.